Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you are here today to talk about all things professional development and study abroad. I'm going to start with a little bit of information for everyone while we hopefully have a few more folks jumping in and joining. Megan and Jose and I were going to kick it off here in a second by introducing ourselves, talking a little bit about our professional backgrounds and how we're coming to the table today to talk with you all about this. And then we're going to kick it off with some questions. We actually got a ton of great questions leading up to the panel today, so we're excited to pull those in. But anyone who's live in the room, you can drop questions too. My only request is that you drop it straight in that Q&A box. That way everyone in the room can see it, including the panelists here. And that way we can also respond live to your answers as we chat and also as we write. So get those questions going. And in the meantime, I'm really excited to introduce everyone to my wonderful panelists today. So I'm going to kick it off because I hear Jose is great at introductions. So we're going to start with Jose. No pressure, Jose. Can I pass it over to you to introduce yourself, to tell us what you do here at CEA CAPA and a little bit about your professional background and what brings you here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you, Heather, for introducing everyone to the webinar. So hi, everybody. My name is Jose Balza. I am the Internship Operations Manager at CEA CAPA. I've been with the organization for 5 years now. I used to work on the ground, actually, with our Buenos Aires team in Argentina. I had an academic role back then, and I also supported the director with daily operations and program development. But then as of the last year, a little bit over a year ago, I started working in this operations management role for the US team, so based out of the United States now. And my background is in communication. I've done like different things throughout my life, but I started in communication. I've also worked in teaching English as a second language. And more recently in this particular role, I've been able to work really closely in terms of business operational items and also educational technology. And in this role, I get to work closely with our US team, but also our extended global team of internship coordinators, internship coaches, and cross collaborate with different departments here in the US in like different operational pieces that are needed to deliver our internship program. So that's a little bit about me. I've been with CEA CAPA for a while now, and I'm gonna toss it over to Megan so she can introduce herself as well.
Great. Thanks so much, Jose. And thank you, Heather, for the opportunity to connect with all of these students today. So hello, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm Megan Randall, and I am the Director of U.S. Career Development and Internship Programs at CEA CAPA. And I have been with the organization for just over a year now. I started out as our Career Development Manager for our internship programs. And in that role, I have the pleasure of supervising our team of internship coaches that work directly with students like you to help you prepare for your internships abroad. And then most recently, I've transitioned into my new director role. So in this new expanded role, on top of everything I've been doing in my previous role, I will be looking for opportunities to really expand and strengthen the career development coaching that we provide to students before, during, and after you go on a program with us, and on any program type. So whether you're doing a study program or an internship program, you might be doing business consulting or another program type, because ultimately we're really motivated to help you move that needle in those career development skills that employers are looking for, so that way you can really make the most value out of your experiences. So I really love my job, and I'm excited to be here. And a little bit about my background: I majored in sociology and then minored in anthropology and gender studies when I was a student in college. I had the fortune of being able to study abroad in South Africa when I was a junior, and that led me to teaching English abroad, similar to Jose. I also did some volunteering and research abroad. I worked domestically in the US with international students, and I also worked at a university, both as a study abroad advisor and as a career coach in the Career Center on campus. And for a long time, I thought that I would have to choose either study abroad or career coaching. And I was really torn. And this opportunity came up to join CEA CAPA, where I get to really do both every day. And it just brings me so much joy. So I'm living proof that, you know, if you don't think you can combine something for a job, you can. You just kind of have to find it. So excited to learn more from you today.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Jose. Well, I'll bring it up last and introduce myself. I'm Heather Gregg Reed. I'm Senior Alumni Relations Manager here at CEA CAPA. So all of you alums I know have heard from me for a variety of reasons, everything from sharing more about what you can expect in the re-entry process, hopefully encouraging you to participate in our Alumni Ambassador program and some of the other programming we make available to alums. And then opportunities like this, we really want to stay engaged with you all and continue providing meaningful resources as you think about all of the great things you were able to do and accomplish during your time abroad. So I love having these conversations. A little bit about my background. I have a degree in education, but also in theater. So study abroad was not necessarily on my radar, but I had the very good and accidental opportunity to go abroad my junior year of college as well. I didn't think it would be possible for me and was so excited when it was, and was so passionate about everything I got out of that experience, personally, professionally, academically. So I came back and was incredibly enthusiastic about talking to everyone about study abroad. And a lot of those conversations, being an alumni ambassador myself, led to me being offered a job in the field. And it was something I was so excited about, I couldn't say no. So I've been in the field for more than a dozen years now, and wearing a number of different hats in a lot of things related to university engagement and relations, but also working with alumni for a really long time. So I've had the opportunity to see the trajectory of so many alums as they move into their career, talk to so many ambassadors about how they can incorporate that experience on a resume, how we can help them leverage it, providing references and recommendations, and being able to actually interview and provide some jobs for former alums too. So it's really exciting to see it come full circle. And I have a lot of thoughts today that I'm excited to share, but mostly just really excited to dive in and learn from my fellow experts today too. So, time to actually get down to the business of our Ask Me Anything. So I'm going to kick it off with a question that is sort of embedded in a lot of the different questions we got. So first of all, why do we even care about international experiences? Why, after we study abroad, should we put it on a resume? Why do we want to highlight it to employers? Do they really care? That's my first question for you, Megan and Jose.
I have a fun anecdote for this, but I think Megan is poised to start to answer this question first, and then I'll tag along.
Sounds good. It'll definitely be a tag team. So yeah, in my role as a career coach, I was able to work with students and also employers for 5 years, and I really got to know more so like what skills employers are looking for in students nowadays by the time you graduate. And so one thing that I really heard from all of them was they're looking for certain skills like teamwork and problem solving and communication skills, and the ability to really just be like resilient and also be able to work with different kinds of people. And when you look at different jobs now, right, like this is a perfect example, right? We're able to collaborate and come together in a virtual platform where we're all physically located in different places right now. So I think with the work world, it's turning into where you will have coworkers and supervisors and reports and all different kinds of people you're working with from all different cultures and backgrounds, all different kinds of identities with different perspectives, different cultures. And so it's becoming more and more normal to have all of these different colleagues come together in a work setting. So the ability to gain that international experience while you're in college, like you all have as alum, that has really helped you grow a lot of those skills that employers are looking for in an international context. So you've been able to like push yourself out of your comfort zone, really learn not only like what it's like to work on a team in the US at your home campus, but also what it's like to work on a team abroad, you know, with people from a different culture or cultures. So everything that you've done, even if you don't like really think about it on a daily or moment by moment basis, those are the kinds of skills that you've already gained that you can then really market to employers to show, you know, you have the skills that they're looking for to be able to succeed in the workplace nowadays. Jose, what would you like to add?
I think it's important to highlight that it doesn't, when thinking about doing an international experience, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to translate that to an international job or to a role that you're going to have to work with international people. It might be entirely local based, what you want to do in your career, with your community, with your state, however you want to see it. But the skills, like Megan was saying, that you are going to be able to develop while doing that that international experience is going to be so valuable when stepping back into the role or into a professional role when doing your job search, because the kind of exposure that you have outside of your comfort zone is going to happen when you enter the job market, right? There are things that are going to be entirely new for you. So having been exposed to new things, having been able to talk to, different people from different backgrounds, it's just going to put you ahead of other, other applicants for the same job or in the same area. So I'm really just trying to make a point that doing this while you're in college, first of all, lets you not have all of the pressure of I'm just stepping into a job, right now, and this is how I have to learn the hard things. It kind of puts you into a more kind of secure, maybe a little bit more slow paced way of learning the skills. And then you're going to be able to transfer those back into whatever kind of job or career path you want for yourself afterwards. Like myself, I am originally from Venezuela, and then I lived in Argentina. And I know that having lived and having, being from a different place gave me an edge in certain jobs, in certain areas, in different fields that I've worked in throughout, the last, 10, 12 years. So it's, as long as you're able to articulate it, and as long as you know where to put it, where to say it, where to add it, that's what's key about having an international experience.
I love that, Jose. You're kind of teeing us up for our next question. But I'll add just one more quick thing. And I like to let folks know that study abroad is still a relatively rare thing. I know it doesn't always feel that way, and it may depend on your campus. You may feel like everyone is going abroad, or while you're abroad and you have the opportunity to see other international students abroad too, it may feel like it's really prevalent, but the reality is year over year, we still see that only about 2% of current American college students study abroad during any given year. By the time you graduate, only about 10% of the people graduating alongside you will have studied abroad. So if it's something you have on your resume, rest assured, it's still something pretty rare to tease out in a job interview. It can be a really great conversation starter. It can be a really great thing to bond over, or for somebody to kind of bring up and say, oh man, that's something I always wished that I would have done. So I've heard from so many alums that were on the fence about whether or not they wanted to include this on a resume, whether or not it felt appropriate to put it there. They've been really pleasantly surprised about the conversations it started, and about the opportunity to pivot certain conversations in an interview around their international experience. So don't discount it, is what we're all saying. But I'm going to transition now to the next big question, which is, how do you do it, Jose? How do you put it on a resume? What section do you put it in? How do you write about it? As one of our question askers pointed out, resume real estate is pretty slim, right? We're trying to pack in a lot of meaningful information in an itty bitty space. So I'm going to hand it over to you all. What do you recommend about the actual act of putting it on a resume?
Okay. That's a great question. I'm going to start by sharing an anecdote that I had about this. When I was in Buenos Aires, there was this workshop that we did that was called the Career Workshop. And it always started as a very casual conversations, because I would ask my students, hey, so just tell me about, anything that's going on in your life, whether that's at school or with your host family, anyone you met when you were for dinner, or just anything. And specifically if you had to navigate a challenge, right? So if the conversation went kind of the way that I wanted it, or even if I had to kind of route it that way, students always ended up presenting the challenge, and also without even meaning to, they were identifying skills that they gained through facing that challenge. So by the end of our conversation, which started very much just as a casual, friendly conversation of what has happened over the last month, students had a long list of skills that then they were able to put back in the resume. So how do we do that by the end of the session? I mean, obviously, first of all, it depends on what you were doing as part of your program, right? So if you were doing study only, then that could go back into an education section. If you added a component that was like an internship or service learning, volunteering, and that could go into professional experience, or that could go into leadership section in your resume. But it is super important that you do include it, and that you are, as you're talking about it in your resume. I know we have constraints, we have, time, not time, but like space limits that we wanna make the best use stuff. So important thing there when talking about the experience is being able to highlight what was your role in that situation, like in addition to coursework, right? If we're talking about a study-only program, what coursework did you take? But also, as you think about the projects that you worked on, and as you think about, any challenges that you faced while you were abroad, you can also highlight specific things that you did and what kind of skills you gained through those tasks or through those projects. So where to put it, it depends on the kind of program model that you went abroad. But then the important thing is that you do make sure to include skills. And also like thinking about like current technology, hiring managers, HR departments don't even all the time read resumes. Like there are systems that now read your resume. And so as the systems are scanning the resume, the PDF, that has to be a very clean document. If it doesn't detect like keywords that, in terms of skills or, things that are relevant to the job that people are applying for, they don't even send them to a human to be reviewed. So it's very important that as you're building out your resume, you do include, as many relevant, you don't want to make it, too long, but you need to include relevant keywords in there when it comes, as I said, to skills and to roles that you had throughout your study abroad experience.
Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, that sounds great. I mean, yeah, I would agree with everything that Jose said. I think one of the key points to remember is there is no perfect place to list it on your resume. It's really up to you. And so oftentimes what can guide your decision is whatever opportunity you're applying for, right? And like, where do you feel that employer or that, program HR person is going to really notice it on your resume in a way that will really showcase you as the strongest candidate. So like, for example, for some of you, like Jose mentioned, you can put your experience in your experience section, your professional experience section. But for those of you that have maybe a couple international experiences at this point, you could create a brand new section on your resume devoted to your international experiences and then list it in that section. So you can customize a whole section of your resume for your international experience as you accrue more over time. Or you could put it in your education, like Jose said. I think the key to keep in mind is that it's not always enough to just list it simply in your education of, like the study abroad and where you went and the time. You really do, as Jose recommended, want to include at least one bullet point describing like some of the skills and accomplishments you made while you were there. And I think this is important. One of the just sort of unfortunate realities is that sometimes if you only list your study abroad experience on its own without any details, it might actually be interpreted in a negative way of like, oh, you just went there and partied for 4 months, right? Like it could be interpreted in a way where if you don't include some of the key skills that you used or accomplishments you made, then it might actually work against you. So that's why we're really encouraging you, include those skills, include those accomplishments. If you did a homestay, if you took certain courses, if you grew your language skills in a certain area, that will really help you maximize the value of adding it to your resume.
That's all perfect. And it echoes everything I love to share too. I just wanted to emphasize that you don't only have to have done something experiential abroad to be able to include it. Everyone who studies abroad on a CEA CAPA program, you earned credit for whatever it was that you did abroad, for your internship, for your courses. So you were held to a specific academic standard. And that is something that you can tease out, whether you are highlighting some of the courses that we offer to students are just super great conversation starters in and of themselves. They allowed you to learn things that you wouldn't have had the capacity to learn here in the US. They allow you to experience the culture through a very unique lens. So think about ways that you can use some keywords that will really resonate with the people who are reading your resume, how you can put actionable things on your resume. So if you're saying, I developed great communication skills while abroad. I have the ability to communicate across situations of difference. Come prepared with at least one example of how to back that up. And if you're able to help frame that on your resume beforehand, that's even better. But anything that you include on your resume, be prepared to talk about in a meaningful way in your interview so that you can really set yourself apart. That was another question we got is, in the sea of people who do study abroad, how can I set myself apart if I've got this experience on my resume? If you're prepared to walk into a job interview and talk about how you are leveraging your experience for your personal and professional growth in the future, you've already set yourself miles apart from people who may have gone for, let's say, more of the, it was a great time. We all have a great time abroad, but the people who are more prepared to talk about the really fun elements of study abroad. Those are things I still love talking about too, but being able to talk about the meaningful, transformational, professionally impactful elements becomes really important. Before we move on,
if I could add to, I think to your point about, being able to come prepared to speak to at least one example, I think, knowing that all of you are alumni at this point, it's very normal for us to not remember those specific details the longer time goes on. So we would really encourage you to, as much as you can, write down details from your experience now while they're still fresh, or at least fresher than they will be a year from now. So, any challenges that you feel like you overcame, how you grew personally and professionally and academically and personally, really just anything that stands out to you that you're really proud of, things you overcame, things that you loved. That way, when it comes time for an interview, you'll have that as a base to kind of think through, okay, what's a really powerful example I could share for a problem that I overcame and how I handled it. So that way you can help the employer understand how you might handle a similar situation with them. Because I think that's one thing that I regret from my time when I came back is I journaled a lot during my program, but I think thinking back, once I returned of oh, okay, it's been 2 months, how else do I feel I grew or what else stands out to me now that I'm able to, have come back from that experience. I think just as many details as you can jot down for yourself is helpful.
And this is the moment where I'm going to shout out our alumni ambassadors. We did get some questions specifically about how to incorporate the alumni ambassador position on the resume, and I'm going to talk about that later, but I can't speak highly enough of how great it is professionally to get involved in a program like the CEA CAPA Alumni Ambassador Program, because it gives you an outlet to start thinking through some of these things and unpacking and committing to memory the things that you are teasing out, because you are regularly going to be asked questions about your experience. You may have the opportunity to do something that is more peer facing over here, where you're answering the direct questions other students have, but you might also have the opportunity to collaborate with your study abroad office on a panel, or to reach out to a faculty member who wants you to talk about how your language learning grew abroad, or how you are incorporating what you did abroad into your business management major now that you're back on campus. And so framing all of those things out while it's still fresh in your mind really is so beneficial, as Megan said. So I can't encourage you enough, whether you are an ambassador or you're thinking about applying to the program, or even if the study abroad office reaches out and says, hey, do you want to come sit on a panel? The answer should always be yes, if you can do it, because it's one of the best ways to really think critically about your time abroad and how you are going to start framing it and talking about it. Jose, I cut you off. Carry on.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that it's important to remember also the different professional documents and instances where you can continue to elaborate on the experience, right? We were just talking about the constraints of a resume and a one-page document, but you not only have your resume, certain organizations or company will require a cover letter or a letter of intent. You want to make sure that you have your online presence be, another space where you highlight your experience. You want to make sure that you take advantage of networking opportunities to talk about your experience, even before you're doing an interview. Like this type of events also connect you, to potential opportunities out there. And so I think it's important to, like Megan and Heather were just saying, making sure that you have that list of accomplishments and skills, because even in your resume, you can list like one or two things. You want to make sure that you have more to that profile and more to add and more to say about your international experience in this other different like live person to person, but also written context that are out there for us to basically get a job. Because it's not, I think maybe many years ago, that was like a very straight line, maybe the ways that you could potentially apply for a job and get a job. Nowadays, like with, you know, globalization and networking events and the internet and just so many things, there are many ways that you can get to that role that you want. So you have to be prepared to communicate it out in different mediums and in different ways, different lengths. So it's good to have those kind of achievements, you know, listed out for yourself, for sure.
Awesome. I want to, Megan, I think it was you, Megan, who started teasing out, no, wait, I think it might've been Jose, that sometimes resumes aren't even looked at by humans. So before we move on, I want to touch on this again. I know there are all sorts of resources out there like JobScan, where you can upload your resume and a copy of the job description, and it will tell you how closely is your resume aligned with the position description. How well is it going to be scanned by a computer? Will your resume be more likely to be passed on to an actual human being? Do either of you want to jump in on tips? Because I think another important thing to think about is before you enter the job market, understanding the market that you're entering, and that certain jobs may be more likely to have a human touch. They might require like a CV as opposed to a resume, versus some fields you're very clear that if you're applying for a job, a computer's reading it first. So any tips on how to navigate that, how to know where your particular field lands in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, this was my world for 5 years. So the applicant tracking systems, or ATS, that's what they're oftentimes referred to, they're becoming more and more common. And so like Heather recommended, jobscan.com, great website to try out. You can do a free trial. And like she said, you can upload your resume against a job description that you're actually applying for, and it will evaluate percentage-wise how well your resume currently matches that job description. And they'll give you recommendations of how you can strengthen how well your resume matches by adding certain keywords or changing the format. So it's a really helpful tool. I highly recommend it. I used to use it with my students all the time. But if you don't want to use a software like that, you can just do it by hand. And so what I've done a lot of times is I'll print the job description, or you could even keep it digitally, and then just kind of read through it and make a note of what keywords stand out to you. So is it, you know, an action that you would be doing? Is it a skill? Is it a value? Like what is in the job description that's really resonating with you that you feel is not only important to that job, but also to the organization itself? And then make sure that you're using those exact keywords from the job description in your resume. Because the more exact keyword matches you have, the more likely it is that you'll pass through those ATS software and then actually be viewed by a real human. Even if employers aren't using that software, the average amount of time that a person scans your resume for the first time is 6 seconds. It's so quick. And so again, we can't stress enough, like, especially when you start your bullet points on your resume, have that very first word of your bullet point be an action word from the job description saying how you've used that exact skill before, right? Like if the job description says that you know, they want someone who is highly collaborative and has, you know, teamwork experience, you could start a bullet point for either your international experience or even another one on your resume that says, you know, collaborated with a team of 5 to do blah, blah, blah. So that, I think that will help you really stand out. And I think the strategy of just like applying nonstop, like 20 jobs a day, just with the exact same resume, is no longer really an effective strategy. It's actually a lot more worthwhile if you spend even like half hour or an hour really trying to customize your resume as best as you can to whatever that job is, and applying for just a handful of jobs a day or even a week, right? Like it depends on the person. But that kind of individualization that you approach with your resume will really stand out to employers. And then I think the only other thing I'd add is it's really helpful to have what we call a master resume. So essentially, it's kind of like your own personal memory log of everything you've ever done and the skills and accomplishments you you achieved through that position. So that version of your resume could be 4, 5, 6 pages long, and you can add to it as you go, as you accumulate more experience in your life. And then every time you apply for a job, you can look through your master resume about everything you've done, and then hand select, which experiences from my master resume and all of my experience do I really want to feature on a 1-page resume or a 2-page resume, if that is a better fit for you. But that can help, like with formatting over time, like as you apply, just save what you have, paste it into your master resume. That way you can start to recycle and rework what you've already done, so then you can save time in the future.
Megan, can you say more about what you just said? Because I get this question a lot. Should my resume only be 1 page? Should it be 2 pages? Is it ever appropriate for it to be more? And I love hearing from career professionals with your insight on this.
Yeah, such a good question. So I think for college students, and this is a mass generalization. So please, if you are someone who, you have a lot of experience, you're returning to college after some time, this may not apply to you. But typically for those that, you might identify in like the 18 to 22-year-old range where, like you might have gone to college right after high school, the kind of expectation is that you'll have a 1, maximum 2-page resume by the time you graduate. I think the key thing to remember is that over time, as you grow more experience throughout your career, your resume might evolve to 2, 3, 4 pages. But I think even so, like even if you were like 20 years into your career, it's still encouraged to try to refrain yourself from going more than 2 pages. This is for like industry type jobs. In academic type jobs, like a faculty member, if you're applying to be a professor, that's super different. That's Heather, you made the call out earlier about a CV or a curriculum vitae. That format's very different. And that one is usually multiple pages long. And it has everything from like presentations to publications to like anything you've ever done that's related to academics. But I'd say by and large, probably most of you will be going the industry route, like working with an actual company rather than the academic route. So it kind of depends, but that's kind of the general guidelines. And then the only other thing I would say about resumes that I think is really important to remember, because I myself am like very wordy, I want to say all of it. And so like my resume could easily be 4 pages, but I have to like force myself to keep it to 2. And the thing that helps guide me in that is remembering that resume in Latin means summary. It doesn't mean you throw the whole kitchen sink in that document. Really, the purpose of your resume is to secure you an interview. It's not to get you the job. That's what the interview is for, right? So if you kind of chunk it out in those phases, right, your resume is just to be compelling enough to show enough skills and enough of a match that the employer is curious to learn more about you and advance you to an interview, right? So that can take some of the pressure off of feeling like you need a multiple page resume. You just want to select like your most relevant experience that's going to help you stand out among other applicants. And then like Jose said, your online presence, like if you have a LinkedIn profile, that's where you can list all of it, right? Like there is no page limit. So you can always put your LinkedIn profile or the domain of a website you might have on the top of your resume and the contact information. So that way, if someone did want to know everything you've done or more of what you've done, they can click on that and see it. But that way it's optional.
I really like that call out too, Megan, because we do live in a more digital era than we used to. And a lot of people are looking at PDFs on a computer screen and no longer necessarily reading a hard copy of a resume. And there are so many options to provide links. Again, if a human's looking at it, those first 6 seconds are the most critical. But if they're really interested in your resume, providing a link to your LinkedIn page, providing a link to a really relevant project, if you have something that is featured digitally online, if you have, if you're submitting an artistic resume, if you have a portfolio, making sure if you spent the time to invest in your online professional presence, you've developed something out through a portfolio, LinkedIn, a website, take the time to link it. It never hurts. And if someone gets excited about you, it gives them an opportunity to learn more about you as a fit. I want to, before we run out of time, I do want to switch to talking about interview. I feel like we could talk about resumes for days. The last thing I want to say about the resume, just to make sure I am hitting all the great questions that we had submitted. So, we talked about where to put it on a resume. Just as a recap, it can go in the education section. It can go in professional experience if you did an internship or something relevant like that. If you have multiple international experiences, or I'm going to say, as someone who's interviewed quite a few people for study abroad positions, if you're applying for a job in the field, it's totally reasonable to pull your international experience out in a separate area, because you're calling out the value of what you've already experienced and how it can contribute to you joining the field. So there's so many ways you can think about where to list it. But I just want to hit on this question one more time. When you experienced so much while you were abroad, and there are probably endless skills you can tease out, among all of the things that Megan, you kind of hit on that employers are looking for in the beginning, how do you drill it down to a bullet point or a few bullet points? What really is the most valuable thing you can say about your time abroad?
Is that question for Megan directly? Anyone?
Nope, it's
go for it.
Anybody.
I'd love to hear what you think.
For the resume, right? We're talking about the resume specifically because I already mentioned interviews. Yeah. I think it goes back to tailoring and know what you're applying for. Both organization wide and also specifically to that role. I think a lot of times we might get caught up in, wanting to say everything that we did at every role and in every experience. But like Megan was saying, that's only supposed to get you in the door. And then the interview, while it does have its own kind of setting and guidelines that you want to guide yourself by, I think the resume, even if you are able to list just two things, a lot of times that's just enough. You don't have to go overboard to say more than what you did, especially not exaggerate what you did, because then you want to be able to speak about that during the interview and then of course deliver while doing the job. So you want to keep it real. You want to make sure that you list things that you did gain and that you were able to experience while you were abroad. So I know it's a lot of, reiterating what we just said, but I think it's making sure that we use actionable words, keeping them short. You don't have to make, because you could think about, I'm just going to do one bullet point, and then the bullet point is 4 lines. Doesn't have to be. It can be one bullet point with just 2 lines. 1 line, that's enough. If you're being really impactful in your statement, then that's enough.
That's great. And I will add to that, being thoughtful. If you're taking the time to put a bullet point on your resume, please be thoughtful and really build out what that point is. If you put a bullet point on your resume and say it's 3 or 4 words long, do you really need it? When we look at a resume, we don't want to see a ton of white space on the page. We want to see that you have enough to say that you carried it all the way through to that right-hand margin. So I'm loving everything I'm hearing. As you called out, Jose, I did mention the word interview, so I think it's time to shift, but I want to open it up. A specific question that we got about interviews to perhaps kick us off is, where in the interview process do you mention study abroad? What's the best time to mention it? Obviously, we hope if we've incorporated it well into our resume, somebody might ask us about it. But say we really want to highlight it. You mentioned earlier, Jose, about this idea of pivoting. I think it's so important to develop that skill for interviewing. If there's something you want the people in the room to know about you, you can always pivot to it. So where do you see study abroad conversations fitting in to an interview process?
I think that kind of in a similar way to the resume, it's something that you can fit in where you best see it fit as the conversation flows. You definitely want to make sure that it's included. For example, if at the stage of where you are, it would be, if I were to talk about my own career, I don't even mention like when I went to college or what my degree is in, right? I just talk about it like in kind of my background is in this, and then I just go into like my most recent kind of the most recent or the most general way that I can talk about my roles. That would be my like upfront piece, right? And then as I start talking about in detail of what I've done throughout my career, that's where I would more specifically talk about the study abroad experience, because you're able to say, okay, I just introduced myself, and this is kind of who I am. This is kind of quickly, I did a study abroad program, And then as you start talking about skills, and as you start getting into the behavioral questions that happen during interviews, I think there you can elaborate on the study abroad experience. So I again, formats change. The person interviewing you might start with, tell me about your international experience. But if they don't, I would kind of chuck it out in the middle of the conversation, also where it makes sense. I think it's important to remember that as long as you're sharing relevant details to the position, then it's never a bad time to talk about it, right? There's never just the one spot to talk about it. I think you just have to find the time to bring it into the conversation in a natural, casual, and relevant way to what you're being asked, and what the role is, especially. And going back to that achievement log of sorts, be ready to talk about the kind of meaningful skills and achievement that you got while you were abroad.
Yeah, to complement what Jose said, because Jose, I agree with everything you shared. When you approach an interview, before you go, it's really helpful to kind of anticipate what questions you might be asked based on looking at that specific job description and just kind of even doing research on the organization. I think even if you can do like 5-10 minutes just web browsing on their website, or what their presence is on social media, that can help to kind of anticipate, like, what do they care about? What skills are they looking for in someone for this role? And then what do I have that matches what they're looking for? And I think probably usually like 70 to 80%, I'm totally estimating here, but a large chunk of the questions that you'll get in an interview are what we call behavioral questions. So they oftentimes ask you a question that starts with a phrase like, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of a time when. And then they'll fill in a certain skill that they want you to speak about. So it'll be like, tell me about a time when you worked on a team and you had to overcome a challenge together. Or tell me about a time when you, had a really proud moment and what was that like, or why did that happen, right? So oftentimes employers will ask you these sort of behavioral questions focused on a specific skill that's relevant to the job, because they want to know, based on your past experience, how have you used that skill? Because oftentimes the way that we've used a skill in our past is a really good indicator for how we would use that skill in the future. So when you think about your study abroad experience, trying to anticipate, like, what are the top, like, maybe 5 to 10 skills relevant to that job that they might ask you about, and then reflect on your study abroad experience and think about, okay, what are some really strong examples I have when I was abroad of how I use that skill? And kind of just think in your head of like, what story would you share with them to show that you have that skill? So I think planning that out ahead of time, like, you don't have to like write down your answers necessarily, but just kind of think through, like, I'm really proud of the way I grew with my communication skills while I was abroad, right? During your interview, listen for what those skills are that they're asking you to speak about. And if you think that's a great time to use your study abroad experience as a way to answer that question, then do it, right? And I think just generally it's helpful to pull from, like, multiple experiences for your examples when you're answering interview questions. So during your interview, you'll kind of have to adapt in the moment to think about, okay, when is the best time to speak about, the skills I gained in my study abroad experience versus the skills I might have used when I was, a vice president of a student club, or in my fraternity or sorority, or what have you. So you kind of have to think on your feet a little bit. But like Jose said, I love what you said. There is no wrong time. Like, there's always room. And sometimes you have to take initiative to bring it up, because you might not always be asked about it.
And to build up what you were saying as well, Megan, I do think in any good interview scenario, you do have to bring a little bit of flexibility. You have to show that you are listening and that you are responding to the specific question asked. And if you can show that you can cater your answer to what's being asked, that's also an example of how you're going to behave in a workplace, because you're probably never going to apply for a job that you already know exactly how to do. So what people who are hiring you are looking for is your ability to frame your existing experiences through the lens of the job for which they are hiring you for. So an example that I can give on a practice that I think is really helpful in preparing for how you can leverage your time abroad is to start thinking about what your future career is going to be. Or it's okay if you don't have all the answers to that. I think we've all talked about how our career has taken different turns than we thought it might. However, what are you planning to apply for? post-college, and have you taken the opportunity to start crafting narratives, to start crafting stories around how things you did abroad translate specifically to that professional scenario? So the reason I bring this up, this may seem like an obvious thing to work towards, but the amount of people, whether they are recent alums or just people that I meet out in the world, I tell them what I do for a living, and they say, oh, I studied abroad once upon a time. And I say, oh, that's great. Tell me about it. And they're like, where do I start? I'm not sure what to say. It was awesome. I know we joke about like going beyond, it was awesome, but truly, we tend to, when it comes to study abroad, we tend to fall back into this mindset of talking about the things that live on the surface, talking about the fun elements. Obviously, it was amazing to get to travel to a new location. Obviously, it was great to get to explore and do things that feel more adventuresome, but being able to start instantly retraining your brain to think through, this is my professional future. This is what I'm pursuing. Have I started practicing how to take that experience? Have a few stories in your back pocket ready to go. Have them thought through. Megan, I know we talked a little bit about the STAR model. I'd love for you to say a little bit more about that perhaps, but think about your storytelling in advance. And is it a compelling story? Does it actually show skill and growth and a connection to what the interview is asking for? So can I pass it back to you for a second, Megan?
Yeah, absolutely.
STAR model?
Yeah. And actually, so I don't know how familiar you are with interviews, but there are a couple of different like acronyms that you can use to kind of just keep in the back of your head. Or even if you're doing a video interview, you can write it on a sticky note and put it next to your camera, which I've totally done. So just pro tip there. But there are a couple of different models that you can use to frame your interview answers so that they take about 1 to 2 minutes, which is kind of the average you want to go for. So one is the STAR model. The other one that's become my new favorite is called the PART model. So I'm gonna talk about that one if that's okay. But the PART model, it stands for problem, actions, result, and the transferability or the transfer. So really, when you are asked a question that's a behavioral question, like, tell me about a time when you worked on a team and something didn't go as planned, what did you do? You want to, like Heather said, have a story that you want to tell, and then you want to use that framework to help you answer the question. So the P, the problem, would be, like, what is the general context of the story you're telling, right? Like, were you taking a class in business management and you were on a team of 5 doing this final project that was due at the end of the semester? Like, that's all you need to say, short and sweet, for the problem. And then the actions is really where you want to elaborate and showcase your unique skills and what you contributed. So I think especially when you're talking about a team, you want to say how you contributed to the team and not just say we all the time, because it's really hard for the employer to understand like what you did specifically to contribute to your team's final outcome. So the actions, you want to kind of step-by-step elaborate on that. The result is super crucial because this shows how effective your actions were, right? And so you want to say, like, in the end, like, whatever grade you got on the project, or how you felt about the project, or what kind of feedback you got from your professor, what have you. But that result is really, really effective. And I think that's the part that we oftentimes forget to mention. And then the last part, which is why this is my new favorite model, is the transfer. So really what is most powerful is how you can connect what you did then to what you're applying for now. So you can say, like, well, what I learned from this experience is this, and here's how I would take what I learned to make a really valuable impact in this role you're hiring me for, right? So like, based on my experience working on a team and learning that, I really needed to take initiative, you could count on me to take initiative in this role. So that way I can really achieve the outcomes that you have, that you'd like this person to accomplish, right? So I think that's really where you get like the maximum amount of value, is when you connect what you did to what you would be hoping to do if they were to hire you. Because I think oftentimes we kind of like expect the employer to make that connection just naturally, but you never want to assume that they're going to do it. Just give it to them and be generous. So yeah, that's the PART model, P-A-R-T. And I can type it in the Q&A so that you have it written out too.
Heather, I would love to add something to all of this applying for a job piece. Do not disqualify yourself. I mean, that's such a golden rule, I think, because obviously you're still in college, or you're about to graduate, you're stepping into that first role. it's very likely that you are not going to meet 100% of the requirements that are, listed in a job posting. You don't need to have 100% of the requirements that are there. In fact, there's data that shows that, there's gender disparity as when it comes to, how basically how confident men feel about applying for a job versus how confident women feel about applying for a job. And the ideal candidate doesn't, it doesn't have to have always the 100% requirement. In fact, a lot of the times, anyone that has 100% of requirements might feel like there's nothing to gain from that role. And you never want to step into something new when that's the case, right? So do not disqualify yourself because, out of the gate without even applying, even if you feel like you don't have all of the requirements, make sure to put yourself forward. Make sure to write out the best you can, your resume in the best form that you can, and to get to that interviewing period or instance, because that's really when you can highlight like all the amazing things that you've done. Nothing beats confidence. If you're able to translate that, into a very, professional, well-articulated conversation, then that's going to put you, even advanced in the running for that position. So just out of the gate, make sure that you have your documents in order and just, dare yourself to apply for the job, because the data candidate that has like all the requirements isn't necessarily the one that they're going to hire. So don't disqualify yourself before you're even putting yourself out there.
I love that. I love that so much. I want to keep going on all things resume and interviews, but I do also want to honor a couple of questions we got about the Alumni Ambassador Program. And for our awesome alums who've taken the time to apply to this program and participate in it, asking questions about how to format this particular position on a resume, how to talk about it in an interview. So just to spend a couple of minutes talking about that, don't underestimate how valuable it is to have professional experience as a recent college grad. This can translate to all of our awesome alums who did an internship abroad. Having interviewed a number of people who are fresh from an undergraduate experience, that's not to say that you can't tease out amazing things from your degree, but it is still relatively rare to have something that is professional and that can translate into so many different professional workplace environments. So for example, by participating as an ambassador, you now have remote work experience. You now know how extremely important it is to keep lines of communication open, to ask great clarifying questions to make sure you fully understand a job in which you will not be getting daily FaceTime with your supervisor. You know how important it is to craft what you accomplished in your lines of reporting so that you can really elevate your successes to the person that is supervising you and collaborating with you. And all of these things translate really well on a resume for almost any workplace environment. In the same way that Megan suggested keeping kind of a success log for your time abroad, I suggest doing that as an ambassador as well. So whether it is, the things that make you feel good about the position, the ways in which you were able to really support students in a meaningful way, or whether it's more that hard data of I got up in front of a group of 100 individuals and gave a meaningful presentation, anything you can do to provide specific numbers behind the amount of outreach you did, numbers behind who came to the table, who you engaged with, and then also just teasing out what it really takes to step into a role like this when you are still a student, when you have a lot on your plate. That's really going to make you shine. And I know this ambassador position is something that students are doing in tandem with a full-time academic load in place. And so this may feel like a lighter level position, but don't, again, to just replicate what Jose just said, don't take it lightly. Really take the opportunity to leverage it and leverage your success in the role. And if at any point you want to come to me or Michelle or anyone at the CEA CAPA team and get some assistance in teasing out the specifics, I'm going to invite anyone who took the time today to be here or to register for this to please reach out, whether it's related to your study abroad experience or to your ambassador experience, to help tease out some of those features. And then the same thing in terms of speaking about it in an interview, really customizing it to the conversation, again, taking the time to go ahead and build some story around what you're accomplishing as an ambassador And I think it always shows great professional growth that you started by studying or interning abroad. You took a sincere interest in what you developed through that experience, and then you translated it to the next step in your professional journey, which was taking the time to apply for this professional opportunity where you are being able to then tease out the things that you're learning and apply them in a new setting, and you're only going to grow from there. So really thinking through that entire journey, leaning into the time that you're taking to put into this, all of those things are it's a great way to start in terms of helping you really shine as it relates to the alumni ambassador position. Megan, Jose, anything you want to add just in terms of kind of these professional experiences students are already starting to accumulate? I know we only have a few minutes left, and I do want to also touch on kind of other international opportunities, other career opportunities with CEA CAPA, but anything else you want to add?
I did have one thing, and this is something very near and dear to my heart, is please go visit your career centers on your campuses. I cannot emphasize this enough. I only went to my career center when I was a student in college, literally a month before I graduated, because I needed to scramble and put my very first resume together. And it was really stressful. But having worked at a career center for 5 years at a university, we love working with students, and we're happy. Like most career centers have a team of career coaches that work directly with students like you. They can help you start a resume if you've never created one before, give you feedback on a resume that you already have created. They can help you tailor, like we've been talking about, so that you can tailor your resume to a particular position. But they're there for you for anything from like resumes to interviewing to your online presence, like really everything that we've talked about today. And especially for those of you that might have graduated already from your institution, most of the time they do offer services for recent alumni. I can't say for like every particular university, but I know where I worked, we had a year of inclusive access to everything that we offered to current students for students who had graduated within that last year. So go see your career center. They're there to help you and answer any particular questions. You're not alone in this process. Like it can be really intimidating to make your first resume. I was super scared and nervous of like I was going to mess up, but it really helped me a lot and helped instill some of those skills and confidence that I needed to be able to now do it on my own. Cannot emphasize that enough.
And I am going to go out on a limb and say most career service centers will also have some resources on this final question that I wanted to touch on, which is future career goals related to international opportunities. We had some questions about how can you stay internationally focused? What types of things out there? Are there career opportunities with CEA CAPA? I'm going to answer that last question in a second, but just in terms of maintaining an international focus above and beyond what we already talked about, which is a lot of jobs are very international, very globalized these days. There are so many opportunities, whether it is through things like Peace Corps. We had an amazing panel a couple months ago on Peace Corps. You should check it out on YouTube. See all the great feedback on the CEA CAPA YouTube page there. But there's also opportunities to, as you all touched on, teaching language abroad, going abroad for another degree. And I just wanted to open it up to Megan and Jose. Is there anything else you want to emphasize for this group that they might be interested in looking into or exploring or asking their career center about?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times, I've met students when they were in Buenos Aires, for example, talking about specifically that region where they were like, well, I would love to do this again and come back, but like only the plane ticket was so expensive to get here. And so I think I would love to put in people's mindset that to get an international experience, you don't even have to leave, where you live. The internet is an amazing place to source, new and exciting opportunities for yourself. So as you're, talking to your career services offices, or if you're exploring other programs abroad, just, go online, but like go online to the good and relevant places for you to identify new career paths. Like there are some, like LinkedIn, right? I'm just going to talk about that one. There are so many places that you could go to continue to get exposed to international cultures, international work environments, internships that are remote. And so the internet really right now is a place where that you can use to continue to be engaged with people that you've connected via that experience, that previous experience, but also that can get you closer to other and new exciting positions and exciting kind of paths for yourself, personally and professionally. And I cannot emphasize that anymore, because that has been my case. And I consider myself fully a global citizen, because I have a very diverse background in my family, my current family, my professional career, where I live, where I work. And so the other thing that I would also add to that is spread the word, like continue to get out there, even if you're not part of a specific program, just sharing about your experience. And I think our world needs, that kind of global citizenship mindset, because that will open so many doors for our communities and just for our people in general. So spreading the word is a great kind of actionable item there for you as well.
I love that. Megan, anything else you want to add? I know we're right here at time.
I know. I would just say, like ask your career center. Oftentimes they have a whole list of opportunities, including, like Fulbright scholarships that you can look for. We also, for those of you that might be interested, we are always happy for students to go abroad again through us. If you did a study program before, why not an internship abroad the next time? We're more than happy to support you in going abroad again, perhaps to the same or even a different location. And then you can take even more courses to get towards your degree and your graduation path. So that's always an option.
And I will add that you get a discount on the program fee if you studied abroad with us before, whether you're studying abroad again or interning again. And if you're an alumni ambassador, that discount actually doubles. So it is really great to think about. We've had a number of ambassadors do that, especially thinking about interning that summer after graduation. There's so many ways to continue pursuing international opportunities.
Yeah, but I think like what Jose said, just be generous about telling people what you did, asking them like, hey, if you hear of any opportunities, let me know. I think like we cannot emphasize enough the power of networking and just telling everyone at all that you can think of, like professors, friends, supervisors, whoever it might be, family members, right? You never know like who they might know or what they might learn about that could be relevant to what you're looking for. That's actually how I found the opportunity that I did right after college. I taught English for a year in Tanzania, and I had told a friend of mine that I was really motivated to go to Tanzania because I met friends and I really wanted to be there with them. And she was applying to a Peace Corps program. And in her application, it asked like, are you also applying to any of these other programs? And when she looked at them, she saw one of their programs was in Tanzania, and she told me. And if I hadn't told her like what I was excited about just as a classmate and a friend, I would have never been like where I am today. So cannot emphasize that enough. Like just tell people what you're interested in, what you're curious to learn more about, what opportunities excite you. And then that could turn into a real opportunity.
And the last thing I'll say before we wrap up is the question about, is it possible to have a career with CEA CAPA post-graduation? Yes, absolutely. We have a career page on our website that lists any positions for which we're hiring. I'm so delighted to be able to say that a number of my CEA CAPA colleagues are also alums of CEA CAPA programs. My very first job was also working for the program through which I studied as well. And so in terms of advice, the first advice would be bookmark that page. Check out what's going on there. The second piece of advice is for students who are staying connected with us as alumni ambassadors, take advantage of that opportunity, lean into that role, get to know the staff members that are in touch with you, because we love being able to let you know when opportunities come up. And then the final thing that I would recommend, just in terms of whether you're looking at CEA CAPA or any other international opportunity, is to keep in mind everything that we said today. Really take out your study abroad experience, polish it up for professional purposes, know how to talk about it. If you're applying for a job at CEA CAPA or anywhere else, be prepared to really leverage that conversation and how everything started with your time abroad. So I think that's a great spot to end. I'm going to say thank you so much to my amazing co-panelists, Megan, Jose. Thank you so much for your time. and for everyone who took the time to be here. For those of you who registered and couldn't make it live, we're sharing this link out with you afterwards. But we're so thrilled that you spent some time with us today, and we're excited to continue these conversations. Thanks, everyone.